As the Central Powers saw their hopes of winning the Great War collapsing, the Ottoman Empire began scrambling to save itself from complete disintegration. The Grand Vizier Talat Pasha understood that his continued presence was an obstacle to reaching agreeable terms with the Entente. On the 8th of October 1918, he stepped down from his position, clearing the way for negotiations that would soon lead to the Armistice of Mudros. Signed on the 30th of October that year, this agreement humbled the Ottoman Empire to an extreme degree and marked the beginning of its final chapter. The terms of the armistice were severe. The Ottomans were required to give up all gains they had achieved during the war, to demobilize their armed forces, to surrender garrisons to the Entente, and to hand over control of the Dardanelles and the Bosporus Straits. The treaty even allowed the Allies to occupy any Ottoman land in the event of disorder, a vague condition that left the door wide open for foreign intervention and eventual partition. It was in effect an invitation for occupation. The empire's ruling party, the Committee of Union and Progress, quickly dissolved. Its most prominent members, including Talat Pasha, fled the country. The political vacuum shook the fragile foundations of the Ottoman state and encouraged the Western powers to tighten their grip. On the 13th of November 1918, French forces entered Constantinople, and the following day British, Italian, Greek, and additional French soldiers arrived. In total, around 50,000 foreign troops stepped onto the soil of Constantinople, beginning the occupation of the Ottoman capital. The justification for this foreign presence was that it was necessary to preserve order after the collapse of the Committee of Union and Progress, and to protect the Ottoman monarchy. But in reality, it was the opening stage of a Western effort to dismantle what remained of the empire. Within weeks, Allied powers invoked Article 7 of the armistice to justify the seizure of more Ottoman territory. The empire's commanders, ordered to demobilize their forces, began to resist. Many doubted the wisdom of surrendering everything to the victors of the Great War. Some considered outright defiance, preparing themselves mentally for a new conflict. At the same time, Sultan Mehmed VI sought to preserve his own authority. He dismissed old officials and brought in Damat Ferid Pasha, leader of the Freedom and Accord Party, to form a government loyal to him. Ferid Pasha cracked down on former Unionists, which only inflamed nationalist sentiment. Meanwhile, ethnic conflict and refugee crises swept across the empire, further complicating matters. Greeks, Armenians, and Kurds all sought recognition and protection, while Turkish villagers found themselves caught between foreign armies and local unrest. Thousands were displaced, towns were left in ruins, and fear spread across Anatolia. It was within this turmoil that the man who would reshape Turkey's destiny entered the stage. Mustafa Kemal Pasha, already famous as a wartime commander and a hero of Gallipoli, was appointed Inspector of the Ninth Army in May 1919. Officially, he was tasked with overseeing demobilization in Anatolia. Unofficially, his nationalist leanings were well known, and the Sultan likely hoped that bringing him into a position of responsibility might calm nationalist critics. Instead, the move gave Mustafa Kemal exactly the authority he needed. On the 16th of May 1919, Mustafa Kemal left Constantinople aboard the SS Bandırma and sailed to Samsun. His landing on the 19th of May would later be celebrated as the symbolic beginning of the Turkish War of Independence. Only a day earlier, Greek troops had landed at Smyrna, sparking bloodshed and tension as they marched into Anatolian territory. Hundreds were killed in clashes between Greeks and Turks. The Greek presence, supposedly part of a peacekeeping mission, only escalated ethnic conflict and stirred resistance. In response, local guerrilla bands known as the Kuvayi Milliye began attacking Greek forces. Mustafa Kemal, now in Samsun, quietly worked to rally support for a broader nationalist movement. He sent reassuring reports back to Constantinople, claiming loyalty to the Sultan, while at the same time organizing resistance in secret. Allied officials in the city grew suspicious, but their warnings were ignored, leaving Mustafa free to continue his work. By June 1919, he openly defied orders to return to Constantinople. He resigned his post, warning fellow nationalists across the empire not to yield. Though an arrest warrant was issued, Ottoman officials on the ground refused to carry it out. This allowed Mustafa to continue building a nationalist organization. That summer and autumn, two congresses at Erzurum and Sivas produced declarations of resistance. These meetings laid the foundations of the nationalist movement and established the Committee of Representation, with Mustafa Kemal as chairman. Soon after, the Defense of Rights Association was created, further cementing the organizational backbone of the resistance. Support for the Sultan's government was evaporating. By late 1919, a new Grand Vizier, Ali Rıza Pasha, was appointed, and he was more sympathetic to nationalist aims. The Amasya Protocol, signed in October, committed both sides to national unity and promised new elections. In early 1920, the Ottoman Parliament reconvened in Constantinople and endorsed the National Pact, which declared that lands inhabited by Turks should remain united and free. This alarmed the British occupiers, who dissolved the parliament and arrested many deputies. These actions only strengthened the nationalist cause. In April 1920, Mustafa Kemal convened the Grand National Assembly in Ankara, establishing a rival government. The Sultan, desperate to maintain his throne, declared the nationalists to be traitors and issued a religious decree condemning them. In return, Mustafa Kemal and his allies denounced the Sultan's government as a puppet of the Allies. Turkey was now split in two, a royal government in Constantinople under Allied influence, and a nationalist government in Ankara led by Mustafa Kemal. Conflict was inevitable. Civil war erupted as loyalist forces under Circassian Ahmet Anzavur clashed with nationalists, while at the same time the Greeks expanded their occupation in western Anatolia. In January 1921, the Greeks advanced toward the interior but were stopped at the First Battle of İnönü. For the nationalists, this victory was a turning point. It boosted morale, gave legitimacy to the Ankara government, and paved the way for the adoption of a new Turkish constitution. The Greeks struck again in March, launching the Second Battle of İnönü, but once more the Turks held firm. Meanwhile, the nationalists secured crucial diplomatic gains. They signed agreements with Italy, France, and most importantly Soviet Russia, ensuring supplies and political recognition. The Treaty of Sèvres, which the Allies tried to impose on the Sultan, envisioned the partition of Anatolia among Greece, Armenia, and others, but it was rejected outright by the nationalists. In the summer of 1921, the Greeks mounted a massive offensive, pushing deep into Anatolia toward Ankara. The two sides met at the Battle of Sakarya, a grueling three-week struggle along the Sakarya River. The nationalists, led personally by Mustafa Kemal, held their ground and forced the Greeks to retreat. This battle was decisive. From then on, the Greeks would be on the defensive, while the Turks gained both confidence and international recognition. The fighting at Sakarya was so intense that Mustafa Kemal later described it as the moment when the fate of the nation hung by a thread. But in the end, discipline and determination prevailed. Over the following year, Mustafa Kemal reorganized his forces, preparing for a final offensive. On the 26th of August 1922, the Turkish army launched its attack at the Battle of Dumlupınar. In 4 days, the Greek army was shattered. Turkish troops advanced rapidly, reclaiming towns and cities. By September, they entered Smyrna, as Greek forces retreated in disarray. Fires consumed much of the city, as both sides blamed one another for the devastation. For ordinary civilians, it was yet another tragedy in a war filled with suffering. The sudden collapse of the Greek campaign left Britain and the Allies facing a crisis. Some leaders argued for military intervention to save their Greek ally, but public opinion at home was firmly against another war. Instead, negotiations were opened at Fredonia in October 1922. The resulting armistice required Greek withdrawal from eastern Thrace and left Anatolia firmly in nationalist hands. The Sultan's government had become irrelevant. In November 1922, the Ottoman Sultanate was officially abolished. Mehmed VI fled into exile, carried away on a British warship. The 6 centuries of Ottoman rule were at an end. The final settlement came with the Treaty of Lausanne, signed in Switzerland on the 24th of July 1923. This treaty recognized the sovereignty of a new Turkish state within defined borders, secured international recognition, and ended the conflict. Although Turkey gave up claims to former Ottoman territories and accepted responsibility for a share of the empire's debts, it had achieved its most important goal, full independence. On the 29th of October 1923, Mustafa Kemal formally proclaimed the foundation of the Republic of Turkey, becoming its first president. A decade later, in 1934, the Turkish parliament granted him the surname Atatürk, meaning father of the Turks. From the ashes of a defeated empire, Mustafa Kemal had forged a new nation. His determination, leadership and vision transformed the Ottoman collapse into the birth of modern Turkey. He had been a soldier of the Sultan, but rose to challenge both the old order and the foreign powers.